All right, so now we're in chapter 20. All right, secured transactions, which we talked about briefly in chapter 19. All it means is that we're talking about an underlying transaction where a creditor has lent money or given value to a debtor and assumed um, security interest or collateral. All right, so let's talk about the um, terminology here. So, in secured transactions, the creditor we often refer to as a secured party. All right. Um, this is the party who's given value. Usually, that means lent money, and they have a security interest. All right. Well, the security interest is an interest in property. It's not an ownership interest, but um, just an interest in property that allows that the creditor will have rights in the property if the debtor defaults on their underlying obligation. All right. So the security agreement is really the contract. It's the contract between the debtor and the creditor, or the debtor and the secured party. The financing statement is the document that gives notice to third parties, and we'll talk about why that's important. But typically, financing statements have to be filed with the Secretary of State, and doing so gives notice for other creditors who might lend money on the same property, right? Because if you're a secured creditor, you don't necessarily want multiple lenders lending on the same property. So you'll give notice that you've lent, and if someone else, it doesn't stop the next creditor from lending on the same property, but if the debtor defaults, you want to have superior rights to repossess and dispose of the property. All right. So, creation of a security interest, 3 steps. Um, Generally, security agreements have to be in writing, and that's per UCC Article 9. The lone exception here is when the secured party retains collateral, right? So that might be like a pawnbroker transaction or something like that, along those lines. Generally, it needs to be in writing, and the secured party taking possession of the collateral oftentimes is problematic, or it undermines the purpose of the transaction. So, if I need money and I, you know, offer my Rolex watch as collateral, then the secured party can take possession of that. But if I'm a farmer and I need to buy a $200,000 combine to help with harvest, well, that being in the possession of the secured party doesn't make a lot of sense, because I'm the motivation for me financing that piece of equipment is so that I can make my harvest and pay back the loan. All right. Secured party gives value. We're talking about essentially makes a loan. All right. Or offers a line of credit. And the debtor has to have rights in the collateral. So I can't, I mean, really, it's just a fancy way of saying I can't give a security interest in my neighbor's car that I don't own. Right? The debtor has to have some ownership or possessory rights to grant a security interest in that property. Okay. So once a security interest is created, it's the prudent lender, the prudent creditor, needs to take steps in order to perfect or protect that entry. All right, so the process that creditors go through to protect themselves against claims from other creditors is called perfection. Right? Because keep in mind, it is possible to have multiple security interests in the same collateral. Right? So you perfect to not necessarily to prevent that, but to give notice to whoever else may want to lend on the same collateral that your payment is first and takes priority. All right. And so you can file. There's a sample a sample financing statement in your book, and that's pretty standard across most every state. Some states also have other forms that are acceptable, but really the goal is for standardization, so that when I'm searching financing statements, I know exactly who has lent value on what when I'm determining as a creditor what I want to lend or who I want to make loans to. All right. So files a financing statement in the appropriate government office. In most states, it's the Secretary of State. All right. And that's your notice that, hey, I've lent on this stuff and I have a security interest. All right. So what does it contain? Debtor's name. All right. I have to know who the debtor is. Right. Description of the collateral. And what we'll find is the descriptions range depending upon the objective of the parties. If it's one particular piece of equipment, just moments ago I referenced a combine that the farmer had taken or a loan to buy. And so in that case, the security, the description of the collateral is going to be pretty specific. It's probably going to include a serial number or a vehicle identification number of that particular combine. Well, in other cases, the description may be very general, and it may be something as basic as all inventory, right? And either one of those is valid. Lasts for 5 years, all right? At which point, if it's a longer term loan, you can continue it with a continuation statement. All right. In other words, the UCC does impose a duty on creditors to, if they make loans that last for longer than 5 years, you have to refile what we call a continuation agreement or continuation statement every 5 years to protect your security interests. In other words, if you don't, and someone else loans, if you don't file the continuation statement and another creditor loans on that material, on that collateral, I should say, you now have a junior security interest. So it's good practice to do it timely. It is possible to perfect an interest without filing. The simplest way is possession. So if the creditor takes possession, really there's no need to file in that case. You have a perfected interest. That's the example where I've given my Rolex as collateral. All right. The other way that perfection can be automatic without filing a financing statement is what we call attachment. And there are several ways that this happens. The one I'll address, the most common, is called purchase money security, or PMSI. And this means that the lender actually gave the debtor the money to buy the collateral. And in that case, it's a purchase money security interest and it's created automatically. No need to file in the Secretary of State's office.